Welcome everybody to the Meta Report. My name is Coach Hayes. Today we're joined by ChrisTFer, the Philadelphia Fusion assistant coach. We're joined by GetAmazed, the current Paris Eternal head coach, and Naru, who is a contenders player currently playing from Europe. Welcome everybody to the stream. Today, as you guys know, Meta Report, we're simply talking through the patch notes, giving you guys the professional insight and the professional mindset on what we might see and what potential changes we might see coming towards the meta. So let's not waste too much time. Let's get straight into this. Let's talk through the Arisa change first. So the developer comment is, this will make Fortify more reliable at preventing large bursts of incoming damage and make it more consistent as a defensive ability. The change itself is the Fortify. It now prevents critical headshot damage while the effect is active. So I've been talking to a couple of people, and a lot of people seem to think this is going to be a big change. I'm not too convinced. I don't know what you guys think, if this is going to be a massive change or not. I personally don't know if this will change things too drastically. I want to hear from your thoughts first, Chris.
Well, I kind of thought about it a little bit, and you think, okay, so who are the two heroes which headshot Arisa the most? You'd probably argue snipers. It happens a lot, especially when you're in double sniping meta. Arisa trying to move from point A to point B, walks into a Widow headshot. But then it's also enemy Arisas, right? When you kind of do like the infighting with shields and you're getting into each other's faces and like sprint each other. But if both of those comps require Arisa anyway, you're not really changing the balance. You're making Arisa better when it's an Arisa mirror. But if it's not really like a significant change when you're playing against Brawl comps or dive comps, which I think is probably the case, then it might not actually make any prevalence to how like reliable she is in the meta. If the only thing you say is, oh well, if you're now playing against an Arisa comp, Arisa's better, then that doesn't really give you a reason to pick it over Reinhardt or Winston or Ball anyway, really. So I think I'm probably on the same page as you, as I'm not super convinced it's going to bring her back too much.
Yeah, I think I'm probably in agreement with that. Like, the only person who maybe you would change that is like with these Reaper changes, but it really depends if Arisa's going to get played even in this meta. I feel like her shields are kind of the main thing, which makes her so strong. And with that, the changes to the shields you had a while back, I feel like that's why.
Ever since they crippled her pull, I think she's just
yeah,
kind of
exactly as well.
Really touched her. That's still the same. So no, I'm not super convinced that we'll see tons of Arisa.
Naru, do you have any thoughts on the Arisa changes?
I tried a bit around in Brawl, and I didn't really feel a difference at all. Because most of the time, at least I played in Brawl, not in like double shield and shit, right? But if you use Fortify, it's basically never the case that you get focus anyway, right? People try and tend to switch the targets and just wait it out. In some situations, that might be the reason why you stay alive, but I don't think this changes really. Like, it's maybe quality of life. It's a little extra, but it doesn't really do anything. And I think it's a little bit overhyped by some people. Like, they say, okay, Orisa is unkillable now. Maybe like that's the case if she uses Fortify, but it will not really do anything.
Some people are really terrified of Arisa meta. So there's any
there is no way.
Like they think it's the worst thing to happen. So any buff to her, and everyone's like, no, she's back.
No, I think there is like Orisa will be. I think the only time when you pick Orisa actually is like most of the time when you wanna brawl with Rain Orisa most of the time, I think.
Yeah.
So like, who cares about headshots when there is a Reinhardt swinging on your face? So.
Yeah. Or even like a sim laser.
Yeah, I mean there is Sim, there is like Echo, there is Zaya. So who cares what we have lasers, you know? So yeah, I don't think like Orisa will be meta anyway. I mean, at least like double shields and stuff. Maybe Rain Orisa, maybe this thing can happen, but never double shield. I don't think so.
So maybe we'll see more Arisa in like Brawl compositions, similar to what we saw kind of in the past.
Maybe,
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Nepal Village, Lijiang Control Center.
Yeah, Control Center is really good.
Yeah.
Okay.
But she was already played there before the buffs anyway, so I don't think it's going to change too much.
All right, let's move on to Reaper then. So let's talk through the changes first. So the Hellfire shotguns have been changed. They've reduced the spread from 8 to 6, and they've reduced the damage per projectile reduced from 7 to 5.5. Developer comments are, Reaper's shotguns have a high damage potential but require close range or large targets to fully utilize. We're smoothing this out by extending the range at which he can consistently deal damage while lowering the maximum damage of each shot. I personally feel like this might be one of the bigger changes of the of the patch. Just because I feel like if teams are playing Brawl, this is only going to make Brawl even stronger. I personally feel like this is a pretty big change. I've tested around with this as well, and it actually feels really good to play the Reaper.
Yeah.
The range feels super nice actually. Yeah, go ahead, Amaz.
Yeah, I think people like understand it wrong. Like they feel like it's a nerf. I don't think so. Like it just kind of it's a nerf against like bigger target, I think, but against like smallest target, it's actually a buff. I think it's like way better. So I think that's really strong. You can like kill easy like no targets like Kree, Mei, Anna, and Lucio, and all of the small targets. So it's actually a good buff for Reaper, I think.
Yeah, well, we scrimmed on it we scrimmed on experimental maybe Monday. Like a few of our players were getting like 1 or 2 shot by a Reaper, which we never would have before, and it was like catching us by surprise. So I think I'm in agreement. This might end up being like one of the more significant changes, which definitely would probably lead towards more Brawl comps.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we might see more Brawl compositions, but again, like I'm not in teams at the moment. I'm not in team scrimming, so I'm not seeing like all of these changes that go on behind the scenes and like seeing what's happening. Naru, what do you think? What do you think of these Reaper changes? How does it feel when you're playing Overwatch? Versus these changes?
I feel like, I mean, I didn't really play against the new Reaper too much yet. I feel like it makes him a little bit more versatile. Like maybe he fits like into more stuff. Probably not more than Brawl, right? But the extra range can help him maybe sometimes. Not for pro play, but maybe for comp it helps the Reaper players. But I'm not too sure. Like maybe this is even like you can one-shot squishies much better, but you have like less tank pressure, right? A little bit at least.
Do you have less tank pressure? Like I still feel like your tank pressure is really good.
It's good.
Is it really?
It's a little bit nerfed, but I think the value you get from the extra range is probably much better, right?
Yeah.
Because you put more pressure on squishies, but you have a little bit less tank pressure. And I think that's really good.
I mean, it just increases his range overall, right? So like the Reaper now doesn't. I don't think he even needs to get into Ryan's swing range anymore.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
he didn't before, to be honest with you, but I think he doesn't even need to go like anywhere near that swing range now, and he can still be really, really effective with the damage. I like. I mean, these changes are definitely spicy. I think these might be like, in my opinion, the bigger changes of the patch.
Presumably, when they invented Reaper and designed him, their goal and imagination for him was as some sort of assassin, right? Who you would kind of like use the TP, get behind someone, come up and like one-shot someone in the back of the head. But as Reaper was kind of played, he was almost always just used as a tank buster. And I think that a lot of the changes now, especially this one, now lead him to a playstyle where you're going to get more value if you actually are trying to play on flanks and hide and then find the right opportunity to TP onto an enemy Zen Brig like during the team fight, as opposed to doing what you did before, where you just group up with your tanks and just kind of left click on their main tank.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just enables more plays that you can do. In general, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the Winston changes. So, with the Winston changes here, the base armor / health has been redistributed from 100 and 400 to 150, 350. The developer comments are, with this change, Winston will be slightly more resilient against shotguns, beams, and weapons at a high rate of fire. So it looks like this change was also kind of combined with the Reaper change, I guess, but just increasing the overall armor ratio, giving him an extra 50 armor. Chris, I know you're a main tank player. What are your thoughts? You're a previous main tank player, previous professional. What are your thoughts initially when you see these changes?
It's one that you can't necessarily point to and say, well, he's going to be able to do this now. Like with Reaper, we say, there's a playstyle change, whereas it's just going to, for Winston, it's just going to allow you to survive a bit better. But that's super important on Winston, right? Like, especially now that we're in the age of Overwatch where there's so much stuns and brigs and all this type of stuff. Like, as a Winston, getting out on 50 HP is the difference between winning or losing a team fight so often when you play the hero. So the fact that maybe now I can jump onto enemy backline, I can eat a stun and still get out and survive might end up being an actually incredibly significant factor in how I play that hero. And I think what's also important to talk about is, I'm sure we will, is the fact that if they've taken power away from Brawl and given it to Winston, that maybe that's like he starts to become prevalent in similar sort of comps as Brawl was being played for the last like 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, I've got some really interesting questions I want to ask like a bit later on as well regarding to like what you mentioned there. Amaz, what do you think of these changes? Do you think these changes are going to affect Winston's playability? Do you think we'll see more Winston now in the meta? Because before we were seeing some double bubble. Do you think it's possible we see a lot more double bubble, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think this buff actually like allow you to play like more often the Zarya Winston comp, I think.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing actually, because like I feel like this comp is actually really strong. But like the main problem of like why people don't play Winston and play Brawl now is because like you can legit int on Brawl, survive and come back and like without any problems, right? And now I feel like giving this buff to Winston allow you to survive a bit more. So it makes the hero a bit like more viable, I think. So that's a good thing for him.
Okay, so yeah, I think definitely it seems like a good change. Naru, do you have any thoughts on the changes?
No, I think I agree with like everything that was said, right? But double bubble was already pretty decent on a lot of maps with high grounds. So this makes the comp even stronger. It gives him more survivability compared to Ball. While there are like also Ball nerfs in the patch that I mean they're not around like survivability, but Monkey is just getting a little bit stronger, Ball is getting a little bit weaker. So maybe we'll see more Monkey and more double bubble.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. I have more questions relating to that later. Let's look over the Wrecking Ball changes. I also think these are probably pretty big changes, considering Wrecking Ball was one of the staple, or maybe still is. I'm not too sure. He was one of the staple main tanks, right? We were seeing Wrecking Ball being played almost exclusively, up until Winston and Zarya became kind of meta. So the changes are his grappling claw, his knockback strength has been reduced by 25%. I think this is a pretty significant change. The developer comments are, for how often it can occur, Wrecking Ball's knockback is too strong. We're reducing the distance it moves enemy players to bring it more in line with the other low cooldown knockback abilities. So, referring to the other knockbacks such as like Lucio, I mean maybe Brig Whip, these kind of knockbacks. What do we think to these changes? Do we think these changes are huge? Are these like really big nerfs to Wrecking Ball? What do you guys think to these?
I think this change enables Brawl comps the most because you have way less disruption now, and it's much easier to like rotate effectively. But I don't think like it's still like good against other comps, but especially like in the comp with maybe the Zomba Tracer brick comp or like dive comps in general, this would have like less value. It's still good, but it will not have like the same impact that it would have against like Brawl comps and shit like that. So I think this is like indirect buff to Brawl comps maybe, because Ball and Echo comps are really strong against it, right? Because of all the disruption you have and splitting off the enemy team.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like, so what you're saying is, when you're playing the Brawl composition, you're just going to be disrupted less because obviously those boops are going to be less effective. Yeah, I can definitely see that happening. Actually, it would mean that you're going to be more viable to play the Brawl compositions. What are your thoughts on that, Chris, on these changes?
It might ironically end up being like a nerf to good ball players more than like all ball players, because I think one of the highest skill things that the balls can do is finding value to actually like consistently boot people off high grounds and stuff. If you're just like an average ball player, you're kind of going like just being annoying, going in behind, trying to slam the enemy team, trying to mark the enemy Widow or enemy Zen, or trying to annoy them. But you don't necessarily use the boop to actually like peel people off and get kills. Whereas I think that people like Ball OW and stuff, that's what they're saying at, right? Is being able to find like the avenues to use the boop to get someone out of position. So it might end up only affecting the really good balls anyway. And I think that as long as he still has the survivability and he's able to be played without needing like a huge amount of heals or a pocket or another tank to help him out, he could still see playtime in certain situations.
How about you, Amaz? Are you kind of on a similar page to what Naru and Chris mentioned?
I agree, but like I think it really depends like the game style of the ball player. Yeah, so I mean I believe it depends like what is your goal as a ball. Like if you want to interrupt like for example like a rotation from a Brawl comp, it's gonna be like I think a good nerf actually, because Like this is mainly what you do as a Brawl. You interrupt the rotation and stuff. You want to catch them on rotation and stuff. But I think overall it should be like you don't like really feel it. I think in a, I would say, dive Biro matchup. Not that much, yeah.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see if these changes really are going to have like a huge impact on Brawl. I spoke to a few other Brawl players and they said obviously it's like a pretty big change, and it's really going to affect like the way you play the hero. And I have a question. I'm not a Brawl player, but does it affect because a combo that a lot of Brawls go for is they go for like the boop up and then they go for like the power drive down, right? Does it affect the boop and scoop? Do you know?
I don't think so.
No?
I think if you pull it off normally, you should still have the same damage. It might affect. That is something I'm not too sure. It might affect double boop because it was still possible to do, and maybe the timing is different now because you land faster, right? So maybe it's not possible anymore.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I got a couple of questions like relating to all these changes now. So this is my personal question. Like, I mean, we kind of have answered this a little bit during the stream, but are we likely to see a shift towards Brawl compositions now in the meta? What do you guys think? Naru?
I think the meta will mostly like be either Brawl or Xayah Monkey. Don't think it will be much around Brawl anymore. Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe like Pokems are good, but
okay. And do you think that it will be a map specific thing, or do we think there'll be like a one comp to rule them all kind of scenario, like similar to what we've had before?
I think it might be map specific. Like Brawl is still good on like a lot of maps, but maps with high grounds, like maybe Temple of Anubis, Gibraltar, maybe Numbani, could be really good for double bubble, right? So I think it could be like something in between, depending on the map.
Okay.
I think it's more team dependent than like map dependent, because like if you take like for example like let's say like goats as an example, like if you say like imagine having 3 tanks on a map with high grounds, it's like really bad, right? But I feel like if you have the right discipline and you have the right knowledge about like what is the correct pathing, what is the correct like cooldown economy you want to use to, for example, like reach the enemy backline if you have a Brawl and they have like a dive or whatever, I believe like if you are strong enough and smart enough and you know like every correct pathing and every correct cooldown management, you can make probably Brawl work everywhere. It's not gonna be optimal every time, but I think it really depends like who do you have as a player, and most of the time you want to play on the strength of your player. So I think it's more like I think the all those changes like allow you to play Brawl more often, but it's also like still depend on like who do you have on your team and stuff.
Okay, so you think Brawl is like a possible composition to be kind of run everywhere, but you think it's more so depending on your team strength and also depending on I guess on your players like versatility or what they prefer.
Yeah, it's like when we start playing goats, and in Overwatch League everyone was like, what are you guys doing? Like we're just gonna play triple DPS around you, and there is no way you guys win a single map against us. And we come in EU, and feels like everyone was getting full hold, and they were like, what? Okay, let's play it again, you know. And everyone was getting full hold again and again and again. And at the end of the day, like after 3 months, like you see like all the Overwatch League playing goats, you know. So I believe like Brawl, you can probably run Brawl everywhere, but it just depends like if you have the right knowledge or not, like how to take the correct pathing and how to manage correctly your cooldown management and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any thoughts on this, Chris?
I mean, yeah. I think the problem is, it's probably the biggest problem that Overwatch Balance team has never been able to get right, is as much as we'd love to sit here and say, well, you can never run this comp on this map, whereas this comp, Brawl's excellent here, but Dive's good here. If you give any meta enough time, it's always the same 6 heroes against the same 6 heroes in every single map. Like, always within time. Even playoffs last season, we originally had some teams were playing Winston with like Lucio Moira, some teams were playing the Ashe Mercy, some teams were playing the Hug comp. But then you give those teams an extra few weeks to test, and every team's like, yeah, well, we've all got to play Hug because that's just the way it's gone.
Right.
And across, it didn't matter. Like that's what Hero Pools was maybe good at. Was at least allowed teams like they didn't have enough time to all cement into the mirror matchup, the mirror meta. And maybe that'll be the same now, especially with no Overwatch League on for the next few months. Maybe, you know, like EU teams will play Brawl everywhere, like Asian teams will try the double bubble everywhere. But I'm convinced that you give any patch enough time, then you never get the rock, paper, scissors dream that we all imagine. It's always just, oh, let's mirror that comp. That looks really strong.
So is that because teams are like, they don't want to spend time to figure it out? Or is it just because that comp is just too strong, you have to run it? I always wonder that. I always wonder that, because I feel like in Overwatch there's always a way. You can always find a way to play around stuff, but some comps are easier to play than others, right? What do you think?
The absolute best case study is the Season 2 GOAT stuff, right? Because it kind of, originally it happened where some teams played GOATs, and then every team eventually kind of mirrored it. But then we actually had the most interesting thing which happened in Overwatch was there was certain teams like Shanghai, like Houston, that kind of said, okay, maybe I can never compete with the best teams in this comp, and we're going to just try and do something else. And they actually were able to put enough practice into triple DPS to the point where the last ever match in Overwatch history pre-222 lock was won by a team playing triple DPS, not by GOATs, right? Which is obviously ironic because it felt like GOATs was what forced Blizzards to change to 222, and then obviously hero pools to kind of happen. But I agree. I think a lot of coaches and a lot of teams aren't willing, or sometimes you don't have enough time to like fully, like, to think about how long it took Shanghai to be able to master triple DPS. It was like months of them playing the same comp over and over before they had the success which they had towards the end. But like we found out maybe on Fusion at the end of last year that sometimes some patches, Hog's just too busted that no matter what you try and do, the team that plays the broken hero is going to win.
Right.
So it's probably a bit of both.
Because you guys were running the Winston Diva Sombra Reaper comp towards like playoffs, and then obviously we saw Shanghai start running it all the time, and then, well, maybe it was Justice that started running it. Oh no, I mean Justice were running a variant of it first.
Day one,
yeah,
and then there was a few teams. To be honest, in NA, most teams weren't playing that comp except for Justice, and even Shanghai, I think, in Asia weren't running it. But it's only after we saw what Justice did, and then we kind of started playing it ourselves, and the teams were able to copy bits and bobs from what they were doing. Every team almost independently came to the same conclusion that if we all keep playing this and Seoul keep playing the Hog comp, then they're going to win the Overwatch League. And then obviously Shock were able to adapt pretty well. We weren't quite so successful at adapting. Yeah.
The other thing with like going and like down a different path like Shanghai did is it's going to take some time to learn, right? And you're not sure if that comp is necessarily going to be a strong comp. You're just kind of committing to it, which is what Shanghai did, right? They when you're talking about the 3 DPS situation.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were sure if the comp was good or not. They just didn't want to play GOATs, right? And so they're like, right, we'll try this out. Everyone was on board. The players were on board, and they made it work, which is impressive.
I think
Go on, sorry.
I think they also like really wanted to play around their own strengths, which is pretty good. But I think like the biggest reason why people don't want to try stuff is, like you said, it's a big risk, right? Maybe the comp you invest your time in isn't good, and you could say, okay, maybe if I would have invested the time into the comp I'm practicing anyways, then it would have been much better. And if you waste too much time and then you don't have too much practice on one comp as well, right? And I feel like that's why a lot of people don't really want to try stuff.
There was it was around the same time as GOATs. There was like a controversy, wasn't it? Because I think Monte Cristo at the time was tweeting teams like Houston, like, you guys are so stupid for playing GOATs against Shock. Like, I already could have told you that you were going to lose before you went into it. And then eventually they were like, no, shut up, Monty, you don't know what you're talking about. And then eventually they were like, yeah, he's right, actually. But I think that's one thing the tournament format, at least, is somewhat important for, is that teams now, to win a tournament, you don't just have to beat next week's opponent, right? You have to beat everybody. So going your own path and playing something that teams don't have prep against or suits your own strength is far better than in Season 2, where, okay, I've got Shock this week and I don't necessarily want to play GOATs against them, but I'm not going to sacrifice a week of practice on GOATs just to beat Shock, because I've got Washington the week after and we can beat them on GOATs, right? So, like, I have to, in Season 2, we always had to think of the long haul because it's just game after game after game. Whereas now that we're in a tournament setting on a certain hero pool and a different patch, I think it's going to, teams that are willing to just go their own route for a month, and say, well, you're never going to practice against what I'm playing. We're going to get to practice against you meta slaves a lot, because no matter who we scrim, that's exactly what you guys are doing. And then if it goes badly, if our comp's trash, we're going to exit it in the first round. But if it goes well, then we're going to have a tournament placing which is way higher than perhaps our team's overall skill level is. And I suspect we'll start to see that a little bit more with the format announced this week. That I think it's probably going to do their best to support teams doing their own thing going forward.
I would love to see that. I would love to see a lot of varying different compositions. And I know personally from as a coach, it is hard to practice versus these teams. If you're not scrimming them often, it's hard to kind of get your team enough practice versus the comps until when you play them, right? Play them, and then when you're playing them, obviously you're in the deep end.
How terrifying is a Chengdu week? Like
yeah.
What it's purely theory is based off because they won't scrim you for the weeks prior to it. So you gotta have like insane like theoretical Overwatch to beat them. Otherwise, they're a team. And when you lose to them, it's like super embarrassing because like, oh damn, how did we lose to Chengdu? But they got that season 2. They got a huge amount of wins doing stuff just because teams had no idea how to react in the moment to what they do.
Yeah, they're a dark horse, aren't they?
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. So my next question is double bubble comp going to be a lot stronger with these changes? I think we kind of answered this question, but I'm going to ask it again. Like, do we think that double bubble will see more playtime now with these changes?
I think it depends on the region. I think Europe will stick mostly to Brawl, and maybe Asia will try a lot with Xayah Monkey. It's definitely like a little bit stronger now, but on the other hand, Brawl also got an indirect buff, so it kind of evens it out.
Yeah,
I would say.
Okay. Chris and Amaz, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it depends. It depends the map, and it depends. I think the players once again. I mean, if like the guy wanna play Monkey or if the guy wanna play Renard, I mean, you also wanna play on the strength. So yeah, I believe like when there is no high grounds, you will go for the Brawl. Like it's gonna be like super easy, I think. And when there is a little bit of high grounds, you wanna go for the double maybe. So I don't know. Again, it depends the teams, I think.
I think in theory it should be pretty good, right? Because I think I always try to use history as like a gauge. I say like, what was the meta before? What do the changes do? What's going to happen? So if a lot of teams were happy to play, I think it was like a lot of Bull Diva, then with like Tracer Sombra, Zen Brig, I think was what most teams were trying to play, there or thereabouts. It's probably quite easy to transition Winston Zarya into that. Maybe you no longer want the Zen, you want Ana, but at least a huge core of that comp can stay the same. You just change your tanks because of buffs. And that's also probably going to help teams who've been practicing or had any success on the previous meta before. And then maybe we're in a situation where if you're a team that was really struggling on bold Diva meta, then hey, let's try a bit of Brawl because yeah, maybe that can work.
But about history, wasn't like 1 year ago there was already like a Orion Diva Creme Ana Lucia meta. I think it was basically
at the start of
exactly at the start. And I feel like everything around that comp, like that was starting to counter it, got nerfed. So this comp might just come back because of all the other things around that comp getting nerfed.
I think that's super true. McCree's been buffed since that, so he's more viable. Like
Diva got buffed.
Diva's got buffed. Like I think it's super possible that comp comes back. I think a lot of people would be happy with that meta too. It felt like it was one of the few metas that Overwatch had where people kind of enjoyed it. I think the start of season 3.
Is there a meta when people enjoy it? I feel like every meta is just people
like
complaining.
No, people will like the meta, but they don't like it if it's meta for like 3 to 6 months. It gets like boring over time, I would say.
Yeah, okay.
I feel like a lot of people like Ryan comps and dive in general.
There's too much like negativity in the Overwatch community in general, I think. If you do a tweet which is negative, it always gets more likes and upvotes than one that's positive. So I think people are kind of biased towards hating on everything that they can really.
It's become cool to hate on Overwatch, basically.
It is, exactly.
Okay, let's move on to another question. So I have a question here from one of my patrons, the Mr. Baggins. His question is, Arisa buff is pretty big, but is it big enough of a change to really bring her back fully into play on maps where she was already half decent to begin with?
I think we're just gonna repeat what we said already. Like you will pick Orisa most of the time only when it's like Rain Orisa, right? So it doesn't change like that much, I think.
So we're not likely to see any double shield compositions on maps like Junkertown then?
I think Hog is just better most of the time.
I feel like the Widow nerf right now, like she's 150, it make her like so bad right now. Like a single ball can deny her like so easily. Like it's actually so easy to deny a Widow now, unless like your flankers like mirror the flankers and stuff. Yeah, but like I don't know. I feel like it's pretty hard now to play Widow. I think you can even play Widow with Reinhardt, like SF was doing. I remember, but otherwise, I don't think like you will see like Orisa that much.
Okay.
Maybe only with Brawl comps. I don't know.
Okay, and the second question here is, could we see, I mean, this is kind of a similar question, but could we see a return to double shield even though there's been no change to SIG? I think we kind of answered that question already, so I'll move on from that. I have another question from Android WK. They say, how do pros feel about Projectile Heroes going into this patch? I mean, with the Echo was the only change really from last patch, right? Do we think that Echo is actually? I'll move on to that question later on. But how do we feel about this question? I don't think projectiles have really changed going into this patch, have they?
No, it doesn't. I think Echo's still strong.
Yeah. Okay, so
yeah, and everyone else is still weak.
Yeah.
I mean, if the brawlers matter, obviously Echo's pretty strong. But maybe May gets more like obviously in Brawl May will get playtime, so maybe it will shift to that if brawlers matter.
Okay.
But I don't think much will change.
And I have another question here from Funky Monk. He says, in fact, this question's already been answered. His question was, is Arisa Orion viable? I think it's fair to say we kind of answered that question already. Arisa is viable in Brawl.
It depends on the map a lot though, because if you play Arisa in open maps, you give the Kree too much space to flank and off angle. I think Orisa Orion is really good in closed maps where their DPS cannot really take flanks, but on open maps where D.Va can take space herself or where she can contest the enemy DPS, D.Va is just better.
As an example of like a close range map, would you say like Lijiang Control Center would be a place where you'd run Arisa Orion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably get away with it playing on all 3 Lijiang if you really want.
On Oasis sometimes in the inside map, it's also good.
Yeah.
Nepal Village. But yeah, apart from that, not much really.
Okay. And this is another question from Josh. This question is similar to the question we just answered, but it's a little bit different. He says, in Brawl compositions, what do you think will be the staple off tank? So we mentioned that on close range maps you'll have an Arisa. What do we think there will be on other maps, which are maybe more so open maps? If you want to run a Brawl composition, do we think it's going to be the D.Va, the Zarya? What do you fellas think?
In my opinion, I think D.Va is more versatile. Like I feel like as soon as they have, for example, like Rain or Orisa or like any sort of double shield, like if you play Zarya is terrible actually. So I think overall D.Va must be like the best pick actually, like because it allows you to be aggressive and defensive at the same way. Like you can do both like pretty easily. So yeah, in my opinion, I think it's gonna be like D.Va most of the time. I feel like D.Va is more powerful. She can do so many things compared to Zarya.
I fully agree with that. I think like the stronger the teams are, the weaker Zarya gets if you play like around bubble CDs and punish that correctly. And you need D.Va, as I said, or the enemy DPS will get too much space to go for off angles. If you have like a Zarya as an example, I think it's really hard for that. And flanks and stuff like that will get much stronger.
Yeah.
And you need D.Va to shut that down.
Yeah, there is also one thing is like when you play Brawl most of the time, like it's Lucio Bap. So most of the time, like smart off tanks will be looking to shift on the enemy backline, for example. So you really need that D.Va to create that distraction mid fight. So it allows you to create like so many, I would say, chaotic fight scenario for the enemy team. So you want to have D.Va, I think, most of the time.
And
that's it. Yeah. And sorry, also... You go.
No, you go. Okay. D.Va also shuts down the enemy ults much better in the current meta. If there's like May involved, Kree, Window, everything like that, right? D.Va is just much better at that than like a Zarya or Orisa. And that helps a lot as well.
Yeah, I actually think that I fully agree with what Amaz says, that if the enemy team are playing like either Lucio Ana or Lucio Bap, then the D.Va is super high value. And I think if you're able to get them to swap to Lucio Moira Brawl, then I think Zarya might actually be the highest value hero against that comp.
Why? What could you like expand on that? Why is Zarya better versus Moira?
Well, in my opinion, especially if you look back to the meta we did at the start of season 3, I think a huge thing of that the good divas were doing is that in certain team fights, certain situations, you were actually able to play as a flanker and mark the enemy support, right? And if you're in a situation where if they're playing Anna, you can stop her from healing, or if you're playing against Bap, you stop him healing and maybe enforce his lamp just for himself. That's insane value. It's probably more value than marking a DPS than doing all sorts of ults. If you block like 90% of their heals, then that becomes really difficult for them. But obviously, if they drop Baptiste and they go Moira, then they're likely to probably swap McCree too, because he's going to feel a little bit worse, and they're going to kind of just play as this 6-man blob. And then D.Va doesn't really have a target which is going to extend herself from the pack where you can mark it or try and do something to it. So you're better off having a hero where you can help your Ryan engage into 6 people with bubbles, and also you're probably going to do like significantly more damage against it.
Okay, so the Baptiste comp is more so like you can spread your DPS further on off angles with that comp, whereas the Moira comp is going to be less about doing that and more just about kind of brawling in. That's why the D.Va would be stronger, because you can mark that BAP.
What's excellent about when you play with Lucio Anna or Lucio BAP is that you don't just have to play brain dead Overwatch where you just run 6 people into 6 people. If you all of a sudden think, in this situation they've got ult advantage, I can absolutely have my McCree BAP play on a different flank and have my Ryan to play to disengage, maybe use my mate to disengage too, and then my McCree BAP wins the fight by picking something on and off angle. Whereas when you're playing with Lucio Moira, you don't really have flexibility to change your plan based on the situation. You're either just running into them as 6 or running away from them as 6, really. And I also think that once you start to have teams with like elite hit scans, and obviously we had Carpe, so this was something we were really effective at, is giving him the opportunity to play on an off angle and a flank to win a fight in itself was like really valuable. So we felt like we mainly played it with Anna, to be fair, not back in the day, but I think that maybe nowadays back's like slightly more useful. I also think if you play BAP against Lucio Moira, then I think just the all-in clash, you guys tend to win because of the lamp itself. So I think BAP's better than Moira, which means more teams are going to play BAP, which means by default D.Va should become meta, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But wouldn't you say if Moira gets involved and you say Xayah is better, maybe Arisa is even better than Xayah, depending on the map, with like less high grounds?
Yeah, I think that's super possible too. I don't really know, to be fair. I think back in the day, teams have tried both it, but I think the logic would work that something except D.Va, if you think that in the infighting that, I mean, teams even played Ryan Sigma at points last season too for the same reason. So yeah, I agree. Xayah might not be like perfect. Arisa could be better. I'm not.
I really feel like Xayah is pretty weak against like a team with a lot of discipline. Like if you play correctly to bait like enemy bubbles, and like as soon as like you bait the bubbles, you go in really fast. Like I just feel like Xayah will have like a really low amount of value. I feel like I don't know. Yeah, I feel like if you focus on bubbles, like Xayah will rarely have like value, at least a lot of value. But
yeah, I would agree with that. And like Arisa, if Xayah is involved, gets a lot of value because you cannot really deny the pulse. You can look for a lot of plays like this.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have one more question. This is from Crowned. He says, maybe this is just a personal impression, but I feel like Echo is not so oppressive anymore at the higher ranks. Is that because of the recent changes, or is that because of the players knowing how to counter Echo more effectively?
You mean in comp?
Yeah, in composition, in comp, like master and above, I'll be guessing.
Yeah. I think. Yeah, go first.
I think Echo still gets played normally, right? It's just like a little meta shift. But I think in comp I still see a lot of Echo. People play I think Xayah Ball, Xayah Monkey a lot, and with Tracer Echo.
I just feel like people were really hyped about the hero, so everyone wanna play the Echo a lot. That's probably the main reason why you could have seen like so many Echo player in comp. I think Echo is still really strong. Just now people are used to play against, so they're like more comfortable at counter it. So that's probably the reason. But I think Echo is still a good character.
Okay. That's all of the questions I have for today, so I think we can probably wrap it up there, guys. Thank you everyone so much for coming on the show. I appreciate you all being here. This has actually been a really good chat today. I enjoyed this a lot. So thank you for coming on, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Alright guys, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click the subscribe button. If you want to get more content, you can also maybe consider subscribing to my Patreon. The link can be found in the description. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.